Tonight on Bridge City News, today is a special day on the Jewish calendar as Canadians far and wide celebrate Yom Kippur. Sentencing for a former Southern Alberta school teacher guilty of making child pornography has been delayed. We will explain why. And U.S. President Donald Trump offers his support to the thousands of families impacted by the devastation of Hurricane Florence. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. If you'll be hosting a festival or a special event to attract people to downtown Lethbridge, financial help may be on the way. The City of Lethbridge is now accepting applications for the 2019 Heart of Our City Activity Grant. Projects may be eligible for up to $10,000. Applications will be accepted until October 21st. A grant information night will be held September 27th, 7 p.m. at City Hall.
The key piece for the downtown core is that we have it animated with activity, kind of trying to get every day of the year, but definitely expanding that to winter months, to evenings and weekends. And there's nothing that does that better than these large-scale events that can be hosted very well in the downtown.
Applications will be assessed for merit and will be awarded by the Heart of Our City Committee in conjunction with the city's Community Services Department. Applicants will be notified of a grant decision after November the 16th. Today marks the final day of the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur, and many Lethbridge residents are marking it with prayers. Yom Kippur is one of the most important days among the Jewish calendar, which follows Rosh Hashanah. It marks a new year and a fresh start for its people. Yom Kippur is a time for Jewish observers to repent for their sins and heal their souls for the new year and partake in a 25-hour fasting.
After sundown, then you start preparing your meal, and you will have a breakfast. Actually, a break fast, and you'll enjoy a big meal. The meat would usually be fish, and because you're eating fish, you're able to eat milk products with it. So fish and cheese and bread.
According to the Hebrew calendar, this is the beginning of the year 5779. Here on the prairies, we often hear stories of farming accidents that sometimes claim lives. Donna Trottier is the program director for AgSafe Alberta, and she says a major cause for getting people injured on the farm is fatigue, especially this time of year.
Well, fatigue comes into play, especially during harvest and maybe in calving for cattle producers. And they say that if you are fatigued, if you haven't slept for 21 hours, it's the equivalent to being intoxicated with alcohol.
Watch my full interview with Donna Trottier from AgSafe Alberta as we discuss farming safety coming up in the second half of our show. A Lethbridge College player is appreciative to be out of the hospital for upcoming birthday. 19-year-old Peyton Olson says she's thankful and content despite losing her right foot in a lawn mowing accident earlier this summer.
It's not something that I necessarily regret. Like, I do miss having 2 feet, but with what's happened to me, I've gained so many experiences that I never would have had before.
Despite Olson's withdrawal from this year's soccer season, she intends to be back.
I'm excited to hopefully be back in the future. I know it's not going to be the same. And it was definitely hard for me to think I'm never going to be able to play the same. I'm never going to be able to maybe run the same or do the things that I did before. But I'm excited to try to do things a new way and kind of adapt and learn new things. It's going to be exciting, I think.
Tune in tomorrow night to hear more of Peyton's story. The CEOs of 3 of our country's largest grocery store chains say food prices will soon be going up. They say rising minimum wages, increased fuel costs, and the ongoing trade war with the United States are the biggest culprits. The chief executives of Metro, Loblaws companies, and Empire say we should already begin seeing the price increases at the grocery stores. Metro CEO Eric Laflèche says consumers should eventually see a return to normal inflation levels. As for when that happens, he's not so sure. Sentencing for a former Southern Alberta teacher who is found guilty of child porn charges has been delayed. The risk assessment reports on 44-year-old Mark Anderson have not been completed, so the case was adjourned until October the 9th. Anderson pleaded guilty July 16th to making and possessing child pornography. The kids in the case range in age from 3 to 16. Anderson, who was arrested in January, taught at Nappy's Playground Elementary School and was involved in youth-oriented programs on the Piikani Nation Reserve. A preliminary hearing is set for the week of January 17th for one of the two men accused in the killing of a man on the Blood Reserve. Stanley Big Sorrel Horse will be appearing in Cardston Provincial Court. Stanley and Justin Sorrel Horse were charged in the second-degree murder last February in the death of Rance Bearhat. Stanley was originally denied bail, and Justin will appear in court on October the 19th. A 23-year-old was killed following a head-on collision on Highway 2A just south of Crossfield. Airdrie RCMP say the accident occurred around 5:20 p.m. yesterday. The two drivers were the lone occupants of the vehicles and were both transported by EMS to Calgary area hospitals. The second driver remains in hospital with serious injuries. Weather and road conditions were not a factor in the accident. The highway was reopened last night around 9:30. If you witnessed the accident, you're asked to contact the Airdrie RCMP right away at 403-945-7267. RCMP in Wetaskiwin need our help. They're looking for 12-year-old Treston Mindy, who left home on his bike September the 16th and hasn't been seen since. If you have information about his whereabouts, please call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. That's 1-800-222-TIPS. Ontario Premier Doug Ford's PC government has been victorious in the province's top court. The court has stayed a ruling that upended the province's plans to cut Toronto City Council in the middle of the municipal election from 47 down to 25 seats. The appeal court rejected arguments that the province was responsible for the chaos surrounding the October 22nd election. Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussein is defending the federal Liberals as new information shows an increase of illegal border crossers in August. Tory MP Michelle Rempel blasted the Trudeau government, saying they have prioritized non-legitimate refugees.
Any other Canadian telling their boss that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a problem that got worse would mean that they would get fired. So when this Prime Minister stands here and tells Canadians that he spent hundreds of millions of their tax dollars on illegal border crossers, but their numbers continue to grow, it's clear by this failure that he needs to go. How many illegal border crossers are currently being housed in hotels at taxpayer expense?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Educate the honourable member on the disastrous record in immigration. Parents and grandparents had a backlog of 167,000. We've reduced that to 25,000. Spouses had to wait 26 months to reunite. We've reduced that from 75,000 to 15,000. And living caregivers who provide an invaluable service to Canadians had to wait 5 to 7 years under that party. We've reduced their backlog from 62,000 to 11,000. They had a disastrous record, and Canadians know that.
The 22-year-old suspect in the murder of an Iowa golfer appeared in Story County Court. Colin Richards is charged in the death of Selena Arozamena. She was a star golfer in Spain who was found Monday floating in a pond on a golf course in Iowa. U.S. President Donald Trump sought to offer comfort today to families who suffered losses from Hurricane Florence. He arrived in North Carolina to survey the damage.
To the families who have lost loved ones, America grieves with you, and our hearts break for you. God bless you. We will never forget your loss. We will never leave your side. We're with you all the way. And to all those impacted by this terrible storm, our entire American family is with you and ready to help, and you will recover. In moments of despair, we witness the true character of the American people. So true. Citizens all across our country rally together to rescue the stranded, to protect the innocent, and to restore hope to families who have experienced tremendous and unbearable loss.
Several disaster experts say Hurricane Florence highlights a problem with the way hurricane danger is rated. The current rating is based on wind strength and not rainfall or storm surge, which can sometimes be deadlier.
There's a significant danger in focusing too much on category with storms like Hurricane Florence or Harvey. The impacts of those storms are much broader than wind speed, but yet that's what the categories in the Saffir-Simpson scale give us. We need to have a way of conveying the impacts of the storm, rainfall, surge, and tornadoes, not just the wind.
It was on this date 1 year ago that we launched Bridge City News here on the Miracle Channel. Thanks so much to you for your love, your support, and your prayers. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of hard work. Joining me now are two of our star video journalists for Bridge City News. We've got Josie Foster and Ben Matichuk. Guys, thanks a lot for joining me here at the desk.
For sure.
Josie, let's talk about you and how we've given the silent majority a voice this past year. Tell me about some of those adventures you've had.
Yeah, well, in terms of giving the silent majority a voice, I think we're able to step into, just providing an outlet for people to share their stories that wouldn't otherwise get picked up by TV, which has been really great. And in terms of other stories, I'd say more of the adventurous, thrill-seeking stories have been my highlights, such as reverse bungee jumping, rappelling down a building, doing things like sledge hockey or trying new things. I also did like backflips on a bungee trampoline.
You survived all of them, which is amazing.
Oh yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
That's
better
it.
for it.
So what have you learned over the past year as well as a video journalist? How have you grown?
Yeah, great question. I think technically I have grown and am growing just in terms of video skills and how to best use your time on the field and in post-production. And also just interview skills, how to manage all the technical details while still being personable and engaging with whoever you're interviewing.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Josie. And Ben, for you as a video journalist as well, you've had some amazing stories, including the Keno wildfires.
Oh wow, yeah, and that was right when we started too. So it was hit the ground running, and it was really cool to, I guess, just go out there and just see the landscape. Like it was, and just thinking, man, I would not be doing this unless I was actually a video journalist. And also we talked to Jim Garner out there, right? That rancher who lost everything, and that was a really tough story, but it was also really inspiring to see how he was choosing to handle it and how he was being so optimistic and just saying, I am going to rebuild.
We also hit the ground running one time, literally, when there was a fire across the street, and Ben and I were literally running together, like booking it. That was great.
I remember that. That was awesome.
That was also like the first.
That was a crazy.
You did a great job with that.
That was really.
Now, Ben, let's talk about some highlights for you. You had a chance to meet former NHL superstar Theo Fleury. That was kind of a highlight. And Jason Kenney as well from the UCP.
When you're in the media, it really just gives you an opportunity to meet some really like iconic people. And another big highlight for me as a sports fan, I got to meet Natasha Stanishevsky and Kate Verness from TSN and Jamie McLennan as well. So those were definitely highlights. But really, it's not so much the singular highlights for me. It's just I'm shocked that I'm even in the media again. I didn't expect to be, and it's really nice to. In an age when political correctness reigns, it's nice to just not worry about that and just follow the facts until they lead you to the truth.
So how do you think you've grown as a video journalist then? What have you really learned this past year?
A lot of my focus has been on my videography skills and even just conducting interviews, right? Like asking the right questions, trying to make sure that you can get the right information out of them, the information that's relevant to the story that viewers need to know. So a lot of it has been sort of around then and focusing on how you can get the right framing, how you can talk to them the right way, make sure they open up and just being the best you can be, both technical and journalistically.
And Josie, for you, tell me about some of the maybe challenges you've had along the way this past year.
Yeah, I think being a relatively sensitive person, like just learning how to navigate like professional and personal, that's been a big one. And especially in this field where sometimes like if you're actually doing your job, like you should be pushing some buttons, I guess, because everyone has a really strong opinion. And my job is just to tell the facts and to tell both sides. But that's a difficult challenge. I don't think I've always done well, but I'm growing in that.
No, and you're doing a great job, absolutely.
Thanks.
And let's talk about some of the other challenges too, like getting out to, it's funny, when there's an earthquake, a hurricane, typhoon, a fire, people run away, but we as journalists run towards it, right?
There hasn't been a typhoon yet, but that would be great.
No typhoon and no hurricanes. Well, mind you, the wind in Lethbridge, you know, we have to worry about that sometimes. But let's talk about the fires in the coulees. You and I went running to that, right?
Yeah, I was at a different event covering something at night, and I smelt smoke, and I was like, this is crazy. I knew there was fires in Waterton, but where is this coming from? And sure enough, there was smoke like flooding the city, and I just saw a stream of cars like leaving, like evacuating, and I called you, and we ended up meeting up, and Hal and I were driving around trying to chase the fire, so that was pretty sweet.
And we had the West End shooting as well, which was very surreal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite the experience.
Sure.
Definitely. Ben, how about for you, some of the interesting stories as well that you've covered?
Oh man, in the media, like you really have to just be ready to get up and go. Like if it's 3 a.m.
Breaking news, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I haven't done that in this stint, but I have before, and so I haven't really had the same midnight experiences. But it's really interesting just even to get into the mentality of being ready for that. And in this industry, I have had to do that before, and it's just it it's cool. It's a cool thing to experience.
And one of your passions, of course, is sports as well. You've covered the Hurricanes and as well the Coaldale Copperheads, right?
Yeah, and you get right close to the team, right? You're talking to the guys, and you know, with the Hurricanes, it was really interesting to sort of hear somebody talk about the Hurricanes and talk about a player. And it's like, oh yeah, Jordy Bellerive, yeah, I talked to him a couple days ago. But then, of course, you know, last year with the Copperheads, you had that, Morgan Simpson pass away, and that was really sad. And so it was just really kind of two different sides. You get to cover sports, and it's exciting, but sometimes it's also what unites, you know, for people who need unity over a tragedy.
Absolutely. You know, and we've covered a lot of stories across southwestern Alberta, whether it's Lethbridge, Taber, Coaldale, all over the place. It's nice that we're connecting our communities, isn't it? Josie Foster, Ben Matichuk, thanks a lot for joining me here at the desk. A cool and overcast day in our city. The mercury will be going up over the next few days. I'll have complete weather details coming up in just a moment. A cool and cloudy day in Lethbridge today. Tonight, mainly cloudy again with a low near 3. Tomorrow, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 12. The cloud should clear on Friday, bringing lots of sunshine and a high near 17. Saturday, a low-pressure system returns, bringing more cloud cover and a high of only 8. Sunday, partly sunny with a high expected near 10. Monday, just a few clouds developing with a high near 12. Checking our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 19 degrees and an average low of 4. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1938 at 32 degrees, and the record low was -5 in 1997. Sunrise was at 7:13, sunset at 7:37. The days are definitely getting shorter. Let's have a look at national temperatures for tomorrow. Rain and 16 is expected in Vancouver. Victoria will also have showers and should get up to 15. In Calgary, it'll be considerably cooler, rain and a high of only 7. Edmonton will be mainly cloudy and 7 degrees as well. A good chance of showers in Regina and a high near 8 tomorrow. Saskatoon will be overcast and 11. Winnipeg will have rain and 12 degrees on Thursday. Over in the central part of the country, Toronto will have rain off and on and should get up to 21. Ottawa will have a mixture of sun and cloud and 21 degrees as well. Pretty much the same picture in Montreal tomorrow with a high near 21. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have clouds and showers and a high near 18. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly cloudy and 17. Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island will have light drizzle and 15. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, a good chance of rain and a high near 11 degrees tomorrow. Ticketmaster may be in a little bit of hot water. A special investigation by the Toronto Star revealed the company hired professional scalpers and ran a secret ticket scalping scheme. The company, which is owned by Live Nation, enlists resellers to grab batches of tickets from the site and then flip them for higher prices on Ticketmaster-owned invite-only platform called Trade Desk. Ticketmaster gets extra fees from pricier resale sales on top of its fees from selling the original ticket. Ticketmaster has sued groups in the past for using bots to grab up live event tickets from its site. The company has not issued any public comment as to the allegations in the report. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada wants more from the U.S. and Mexico before it signs a revamped NAFTA agreement. He says there's going to have to be a certain amount of movement before the talks produce a good deal for Canada. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland sat down with her U.S. counterpart Robert Lighthizer again in Washington earlier today. Freeland says she has developed a special filing system for the complex NAFTA information she needs to familiarize herself with.
As you might imagine, I have some fairly complex briefing books right now, which I am immersed in. I even now have developed a special filing system involving various transparent folders, which I've become quite fetishistic about, and that is my core reading. I've discovered from our trade negotiators, they're very kind of specific about how they store all their notes on each issue, and they've kind of converted me. So I carry around a lot of paper, and that's what I'm focused on.
One of our regular contributors, award-winning journalist Brian Lilly, says a big reason why Canada and the United States haven't completed a trade deal yet is because of our Foreign Affairs Minister. Lilly says negative comments Chrystia Freeland made about U.S. President Donald Trump has not sat well with the White House or Congress.
They want nothing to do with her. And she's heading back down to Washington to try and finish off the NAFTA negotiations. No wonder on Monday and Tuesday she was unable to give firm deadlines on when she actually had a meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Lilly discussing NAFTA and how negotiations are impacting the Liberals' popularity coming up after business news. Are you a parent who's frustrated with how much time your kids spend on their phones? there is help from Apple, which now offers screen time controls.
If you're a parent, no doubt you've gotten into arguments with your kids about putting their phones down. Apple's new iOS 12 update promises to offer some help through some screen time controls. So you set this up through family sharing, and the device will walk you through the process. First off is downtime. You basically choose the hours in which your phone is mostly off limits to your kid. It could also be a tablet as well. Unfortunately, you can only set one downtime per day. So it could be during the hours they're supposed to be in bed, but you can't also add school hours. It's one or the other. Once the time runs out, the kid can request permission. You'll get a notification. You can either ignore it or approve it. If you're doing this for yourself, you get the same you get the same downtime. You get the same app limits. You get all that. For an adult as well. The difference is the passcode is optional. If anything, it will give you some awareness about how much you're using it. You may not be realizing that you're picking up the phone 50 times a day. When you get up, in the middle of the night, go use the bathroom and check Facebook. Here, the stats will tell you, hey, you were up at 4 o'clock when you should have been sleeping.
I wish they had that when my kids were little. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, if you'll be hosting a festival or a special event to attract people to downtown Lethbridge, financial help may be on the way. The City of Lethbridge is now accepting applications for the 2019 Heart of Our City Activity Grant. Projects may be eligible for up to $10,000. Applications will be accepted until October the 21st, and a grant information night will be held September 27th, 7 o'clock at City Hall. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. As you heard on BCN, Ontario Liberal MP Leona Alislev crossed the floor to the Conservatives. Now, this is not the first time an MP has crossed the floor. In fact, it's happened many times before. One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, gives us his thoughts next as to why this happens. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Symphony concert season is opening with its resident professional string quartet, Musaeus, presenting Extra A Fall-In Strings on Friday, September 21st at 7:30 p.m. at Casa. Following the concert, enjoy an afterglow reception with an opportunity to interact with the performers. Tickets are $35 and available online at lethbridgesymphony.org or call 403-328-6808, extension 101. Come on out to the 8th annual Word on the Street Festival taking place on Saturday, September 22nd from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Lethbridge Public Library main branch. This event will feature panel discussions, demonstrations, workshops, live music, a marketplace, and much more. For details, visit thewordonthestreet.ca/Lethbridge. The 29th Annual Giant Pumpkin Festival and Auction in support of the Children's Wish Foundation is taking place Saturday, September 29th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Greenhaven Garden Center. Come out and enjoy face painting, wagon rides, a petting zoo, plus a live and silent auction, and much more. Currently, they're seeking sponsorships, auction donations, and volunteers to help make this day a success. For more information, contact Jamie at 403-795-4339. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you first saw on Bridge City News, Ontario Liberal MP Leona Oleslev crossed the floor to the federal Conservatives. Now, to talk about that floor crossing and some of the other big stories from the Hill is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Brian joins me once again from Ottawa. Brian, did the Liberals really see this coming?
I don't think they did at all. I mean, they were expecting to go into the House of Commons on Monday afternoon, the first day the House is back for the fall session. They haven't sat since the end of June, Hal, and they're all pumped. They're going to talk about all the great things they've done over the last 3 years. This is the launch of the 2019 election campaign. Honestly, that's how they were viewing this. And then Leona Oleslev stands up in the middle of member statements and denounces the government and quite literally walks across the floor to sit with the Conservatives. So they didn't see this coming at all. It's a big slap in the face to the government. It completely derailed what they were hoping to do. And bad day all around for Justin Trudeau. This past Monday, there was no way around that, whether you're talking about NAFTA or anything else or the floor crossing. It was a bad day for Justin Trudeau.
So how much do you think this will really hurt the Liberals heading into the fall 2019 election?
You know, it's tough to tell. I mean, regionally, maybe. Nationally, probably not so much. I've covered so many of these floor crossings over the years. People ask me, well, when was the last time it happened? I actually couldn't tell you. I guess Maxime Bernier leaving the Conservatives to sit as an independent would be one example. But there have been so many examples provincially, federally. You know, I can point back to Scott. Do you remember Scott Bryson? He's the Treasury Board president now. I believe that's still his current position. He used to be a Conservative MP. He ran for the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party when Joe Clark won it. And he ran on a very right-wing platform, by the way. He made Joe Clark look like a lefty with his platform. And then when he didn't win, he said, oh, I don't really like this. And he bolted and went to the Liberals. That's the way things normally go, is that people leave the opposition and they go towards the governing party. We can point to Belinda Stronach, of course. She was someone that ran against Stephen Harper and Tony Clement for leader of the Unified Conservative Party. She lost. She wasn't happy with her position in shadow cabinet or as a critic and bolted and joined Paul Martin's government. They offered her something sweet to make sure that they didn't lose a non-confidence vote. You can point to when the Conservatives were in. David Emerson. I'm standing there at Rideau Hall on, I think it was February the 4th, 2006. I think that was the day of the swearing in. And all of a sudden, David Emerson gets out of a car. And we're all thinking, what the heck is this? You're just waiting for the cabinet ministers to show up. And here's the former Paul Martin Liberal cabinet minister showing up. And David Emerson said he was asked to serve in cabinet. He was a guy from BC who only joined the Liberals and the government, he said, because, well, he'd been a CEO, he'd been, a private sector executive, he'd been a high-level bureaucrat, and he just wanted to serve his country. He didn't care what party it was. So in Stephen Harper's first cabinet, you had David Emerson. A little while later, you had Wajid Khan walking over from the Liberals to the Conservatives. This has happened so many times, I can't even keep track of them all out.
But let me ask you something. Isn't this a slap in the face to those who voted for you, especially if somebody voted for her as a Liberal, voting for the Liberal Party?
Some might see it as that, but look, for all those people that say, well, you need to either sit as an independent or you need to resign and run in a by-election because I voted for a Liberal. If you do that, then what we are effectively doing is saying we no longer have faith in the individual members of Parliament. We have faith in the party apparatchiks. We have faith in the people that run the parties. I know people that run all the parties, Hal. I have faith in none of them. I don't want any of them to have any more power than they already have. Because, look, if we give more power to the party brass, then it takes more power away from the individual MP, which means it takes more power away from the voters. So all the people that want proportional representation or ranked ballots or all of these things, all of those put more power in the hands of the power brokers in the parties. And so you want to be a party member, you don't have to go out and convince the people in your neighborhood or your district. You have to convince the party brass to put you on a list. And so, then voters don't matter, party brass matter. And that's why I really oppose this idea that you should have to resign. Winston Churchill, he was a conservative, then he was a liberal, and he changed parties several times, and he's considered one of the greatest statesmen of Western civilization in the modern era.
Brian, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland is heading back to Washington for NAFTA talks, but Ontario Premier Doug Ford is also headed on over. Brian, things make it a little tougher to get a deal done since Freeland referred to Trump as taking on the tyrant and compared him to Syria's Bashar al-Assad.
I really can't believe that she took part in this conference last week. It was Monday of last week. She took a break from the NAFTA negotiations, went to Toronto and took part in this conference. And the panel that she's a part of, along with Heather Reisman, who's the CEO of Indigo in Chapters, and a woman who writes for, I believe it's the New Yorker magazine, Masha. And the three of them are sitting there talking, but before they're introduced, there's a video that plays, and it shows Vladimir Putin, Erdogan of Turkey, and Bashar al-Assad. And it talks about how we've got to take on the tyrant. Well, and then it ends with a giant photo of, or a giant shot of Donald Trump sounding angry. Like you don't hear what he's saying, but he's sounding angry, and it's saying we've got to take on the tyrant. Wait a minute. The woman down there on the left of the screen, she's got to go back down to Washington and start negotiations. I'm sorry, that is not the best move that she has ever made. It was bad enough that in June she went down and she gave a speech in Washington where she turned around and was, basically attacking Trump foreign and domestic policy. But now she's sitting in Toronto saying we got to take on the tyrant, and Trump was the entire subtext. From people that I've spoken to, I've spoken to a couple of people unrelated who don't actually know each other, don't actually talk, but they both tell me the same thing. The White House, Hal, is furious, and Chrystia Freeland is persona non grata. They want nothing to do with her. And she's heading back down to Washington to try and finish off the NAFTA negotiations. No wonder on Monday and Tuesday she was unable to give firm deadlines on when she actually had a meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer.
Maybe they should consider Brian Mulroney. He's been hired as a consultant anyway. And, he may have that relationship already, a better relationship with Washington.
And he might be a bit smarter around the politics. Jean Chrétien would be smarter around the politics. Any of these people. And look, for anyone that says, oh, well, Lily's just a conservative and he's going to bash them. You know me, Hal. I spent a year and a half saying Chrystia Freeland's the adult in the room. She's doing great work on this. And it was only a couple of months ago as things started to fall off the rails that I said, what is she doing? But last week's outburst was, it has set the White House on edge, and they're not happy.
I got two words for you. Inner voice. Don't let it leave.
Just and some people may be happy that she says these things because, I want to stand up to Donald Trump. You go ahead and do that, but you be ready to explain to your neighbors, your cousin, your brother, your sister, your wife, whatever, why they lost their job because you just wanted to make sure that you stuck it to the man.
Okay, let's move on from that. Now, Canada is now short 275 pilots for our Air Force, Brian. Recruitment is not keeping up with retirements and even with attrition.
Yeah, we don't have a very big Air Force, Hal. I mean, 275 pilots short in the Royal Canadian Air Force is huge. I don't want to make it sound like we just have CF-18s, but we have fewer than 80 CF-18s that are operational at this point. So those are our fighter jets, and then we've got the Snowbirds, obviously. We've got refueling planes. We've got the big Globemasters. We've got the Challengers and the giant Airbus that flies around the Prime Minister. All of these are flown by the Royal Canadian Air Force, and they're very talented pilots. But a new report out says, we are short 275 pilots. We cannot keep up with attrition. And so sometimes with attrition, it's someone that's lived their full career in the Air Force. And sometimes it's people that, like so many guys I know, I was only ever a reservist and decided this wasn't for me and moved on. But other guys I know have gone into the regular force for 4, 5, 10 years, and then they say, you know what, I want to move on. I want to do something else. I know guys that went into the Royal Canadian Air Force so that they could learn to be a pilot and then move on to the more lucrative field of flying for Air Canada or WestJet or Porter. And, well, I guess more and more people are doing that, and they're not able to recruit. This has to be concerning for us. Of course, I guess the upside is we don't have enough fighter jets, and we're buying old ones from the Australians in order to replace them. So I guess having a shortage of planes may not be a downside when you have a shortage of pilots.
Now, still with the military, after promising to make veterans a priority, it turns out the Trudeau Liberals have left $372 million set aside for veterans unspent. Tell me more about that.
This is not unusual, and I don't want to make this out to be a huge thing, but sometimes you've got to live, what's the old saying? You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And so the Harper Conservatives hadn't spent all the money set aside for veterans, because sometimes it becomes a case of, all right, did enough veterans come forward to seek the services that we have on offer? In some years, yes. Sometimes there's an oversubscription. Sometimes you expect there will be X number that come forward and there's fewer. And so you've set aside a certain amount and it hasn't been spent. So since the Liberals have been in power, they've left $372 million unspent. Now, if we were to just be fair, then we would say, that's it. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to worry about it. But when the Liberals were in opposition, Hal, they railed against this. They called this a failure of the Harper Conservatives. They talked about how awful this was, that they weren't looking after our men and women that had fought so valiantly for us. Well, okay, this is one of those live by the sword, die by the sword moments. Now the Liberals are trying to say, oh, this is normal. This is fine. Don't worry about it. Well, which one is it? Is it awful and despicable and a sign that the government doesn't care about veterans, which is what you said just a few short years ago? Or is it just normal course of business? And I don't know how the Liberals get out of this, because people that want to be sane like me and just say, all right, these things happen in government, they don't get listened to. What gets listened to are the people that are willing to yell and scream the loudest for either side, one way or the other. And so while I'd be willing to cut the Liberals some slack, they didn't cut the previous government any slack for doing this very same thing.
Well, what's interesting too is that Justin Trudeau went on to say, they're asking for more than we can give, being our veterans, and yet there's $372 million sitting on the table. This doesn't make any sense.
And he was asked, his answer to that question was in response to giving $10.5 million to Omar Khadr. And veterans were being told, you're asking for more than we can give. So politically, this is more a political question and more difficult for the Liberals politically than it is actually when it comes to how things break down in terms of the day-to-day operations of government.
Brian, Canadian singer Bryan Adams has a few choice words for the House of Commons. He actually wants Ottawa to give artists more control of their own work as MPs look to improve the Copyright Act.
Yeah, well, okay. So have you ever been out at a restaurant, Hal, and it's somebody's birthday? Maybe it's your birthday, your wife, one of your kids. And remember, they used to come around and they'd say, happy birthday to you, right? And now they don't. Every restaurant has their own song. Hey, Hal, it's your birthday. And they all have this thing. That's because of the Copyright Act, which says that for up to 25 years after you've died, that the copyright can be enforced. Well, Bryan Adams has come forward and said, look, an awful lot of young singers, and he said, I was one of them, you sign on to your first record deal. You just want to get in the game. You want something. And so you sign away the rights to your material. And that lasts until 25 years after you're dead. And he said, other countries, it's 25 years after you've signed away the rights. So you're a 20-year-old, and you signed away the rights to your song and it becomes a hit song, well, the record label can make money off of that for 25 years. But he says after that 25 years, when you're 45, guess what? You should get those rights back. you should be able to do that. And so MPs are currently studying the Copyright Act. And Brian Adams shows up on Parliament Hill to make this presentation, and this is his big push. Now, of course, MPs had all kinds of questions for them. They wanted to ask him about everything. Some of them were fanboying, fangirling on the Canadian celebrity, the Canadian star, and he had to keep bringing them back. Hold on. No, I'm just here to talk about this. I don't want to talk about streaming. I don't want to talk about anything else. You can pose with me for a selfie afterwards, but I want to talk about this. I think it's a fair compromise that he's asking for as someone that works in a business that is built and derived from copyright. I think that singers, songwriters, musical artists still get the short end of the stick when it comes to this side of the industry.
One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me via Skype. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
We've all heard the tragic stories of someone getting caught in farm machinery or even drowning in a pond. Many of these tragedies are preventable. Farm safety is a real issue in this country. Joining me now to discuss the subject is Donna Trottier, the Program Director for Ag Safe Alberta. Welcome to BCN.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, tell me a bit more about your organization.
So the Ag Safe Alberta Society came about as a result of Bill 6, the legislation that came in place to put the farm and ranch, or the occupational health and safety on farms and ranches in Alberta. So Ag Safe Alberta is a collaboration of crop and livestock sector organizations. It includes both crop and livestock sector. It's industry-led, and we have a board of directors that leads the direction of the organization, and all of those board of directors are producers from around the province. So they're leading the charge on what the society does. And our mandate is to deliver farm and ranch safety management tools and resources and programs for farms and ranches to help them implement some further safety measures on their farms.
So what are some of the key changes the province has put into place to make farms safer?
Well, as you probably heard about, in the fall, it was December of 2015, the government came out with the Enhanced Protection for Farm and Ranch Workers Act, which was meant to provide the same safety measures for farm workers that are provided to other industries, workers in other industries in the province. And that act made the Occupational Health and Safety Act applicable to workers on farms and ranches in Alberta. It came with the act and the regulations in the beginning, and then the code is coming into place in December this year, 2018.
Are farmers taking the time to properly train their workers and kids in safety?
Yes, they are. I think the farm is a complicated environment. It's different than other environments out there because the kids and the families grow up in the same place that they're doing their work. So it's a little bit different than maybe working in the oil and gas industry. You don't generally take your kids to work with you. So it's a bit of a different environment. Kids grow up learning what goes on the farm, and they learn the hazards and the things to look out for. And farmers are taking the time to train their children and their workers on hazards on the farm, and they sort of innately adopt it because they grew up around it. So every farm operation is unique, and every farm manager is unique, so they're all not doing a top-notch job, but some of them are doing a fantastic job in incorporating safety into their operations and their families.
So would you say a big part of this is actually making sure you have a plan in place for emergencies, including having response supplies and equipment on hand?
Yeah, I think emergency response is one of the key components in any farm safety management program. So part of that is setting up a plan, deciding what emergencies could happen on my farm, and then coming up with tools and emergency equipment to have it in place and make sure everybody on the farm knows what their responsibility is if an emergency does happen. What are they to do? So that training component comes in everywhere in a safety program, including emergencies.
You know, we all hear how hard farmers work across Alberta and the prairies here. You know, the many, many hours, especially around harvest time. How much of an issue is it working while over-fatigued?
Well, fatigue comes into play, especially during harvest and maybe in calving for cattle producers. And they say that if you are fatigued, if you haven't slept for 21 hours, it's the equivalent to being intoxicated with alcohol. So it can have a very strong impact on your reaction time, your alertness, and your abilities to operate equipment and that kind of thing. So it's very important. And you know, when farmers are under the pressure of the seasons and the weather, so this year it's bad because they're taking too much of a break because of the rain, and so they're not able to get out there. But when they are, they're under the pressure. So when the sun's shining, they got to get the work done, and it's hard to ask them to take a break. If you're tired, take a break. That's hard for them to do because they're under the pressure to get the crop in. So there's other tools and techniques that you can use to manage fatigue, like taking breaks or working in shifts if you have that possibility of letting somebody take a break so they can have a nap. Keep your nutrition up before the busy seasons. Get your equipment in order and in good working order so that it doesn't break down, and then you can keep going when the weather's good. Those kind of things help battle fatigue.
Donna, what should kids know about farm vehicle safety? We hear about people getting run over or getting pinned by a vehicle. Does this have to do with either the driver or the pedestrian not properly being aware of their surroundings?
I think the incidents that happen with vehicles, that's the highest fatality rate comes from runovers and rollovers. So sometimes it's driver error, sometimes it's equipment failure. We can't attribute it to just one cause, but there are ways to prevent runovers and rollovers. Training the drivers of the equipment, training people who are going to be in the environment of where the hazards are. And the key to any safety management program is that hazard management component. So identifying those hazards, what could go wrong, and getting the kids and the drivers and the people on the farm looking for what could go wrong and identifying those hazards and just making them aware of what could happen so that they can keep themselves safe.
You know, kids and adults sometimes get tangled in some of this equipment, farm machinery. I think of, grain augers, maybe combines. And I also know some farmers that have allowed their children to operate some of this heavy equipment, this heavy machinery, as young as 8, 9, and 10 years of age. Is there kind of like a minimum age where you should, or maybe even training, where you can allow these kids to run some of this heavy equipment?
Yeah, that's really up to the farm manager and the parent in the situation, what they do on their farm. But AgSafe Alberta really recommends that the driver is trained and competent, and testing that competency, even adults that you get to drive your equipment, train them on the safe operation of the equipment, safe maintenance, keeping the equipment in good shape, but also testing their competency after you've trained them. Did they really learn anything? Are they really competent to operate that equipment in the farm environment that they're being put in? That can go back to children as well. Different children, like 2 14-year-olds might be completely different in their ability to operate a piece of equipment, depending on their level of maturity and their uptake of the training. So age-appropriate tasks are one thing, but also checking their competency to operate the equipment.
A couple of stories we had on BCN recently were deaths reported by people who were killed by quads, you know, the rollovers. We often hear about riding accidents such as ATVs and motorbikes. What safety precautions should we really take, especially when it comes to quads?
With quads, it's about training again, and really
speed, I guess, right?
Speed and the conditions that you're driving in, and something might come up that you weren't expecting. A hill might be steeper than you thought it was, so if you're turning on the hill, that kind of a thing. And just being prepared for that ahead of time, slowing down when you're making turns, wearing a helmet, and even it says on the quads that you should be 16 years old to operate the equipment. So following those recommendations, I know kids are going to be out there driving the equipment, but there's ATV courses that can be taken, and we recommend getting the children to take those courses before they're allowed to operate the equipment.
And I guess in the wintertime as well, we can talk about sleds, right? Snowmobiles too. You have to have proper training for those.
Yeah, same kind of rules, and the conditions that they're going out in, and do they know, have they been trained to watch for water bodies that might not be frozen over as much as they think they are? Those kind of things come into play too.
Or sometimes a log or a tree that's hidden under the snow and they hit it, you know, full impact. I know people have lost their lives that way as well. Now, what about equestrian accidents? Any advice on how to stay safe there?
Again, the training is important. I think a lot of the people that use horses in cattle, managing cattle, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. If you use horses managing cattle, a lot of those people have been doing that for years, and so pairing those people with somebody who's new to maybe riding a horse among cattle, and getting them to mentor or coach them and train them, because it's a whole different environment if you're working around cattle with a horse. Again, we encourage wearing helmets, but that's up to the employer to assess the hazards and see if they want people to be wearing helmets in their operation.
Well, let's talk a bit about animal-related injuries. How common is it for somebody to fall off a horse or maybe get trampled, kicked, or even headbutted? Is it very rare?
I think there are lots of incidents with livestock, managing livestock. It isn't as prominent as rollovers and runovers with equipment, but people do get injured, they get bit, they get headbutted, those kind of things. And it's a big part of preventing that is understanding animal behavior. Large animals, all animals are very predictable or unpredictable.
Right.
And so knowing that and working around the livestock, knowing that they could make a move that you're not expecting is really important. Taking some livestock handling courses if you're going to be working with livestock. We have some videos on our website, agsafeab.ca, that have some tips for working with livestock, and it's a producer that's giving those tips, so I encourage you to look at those.
And maybe getting involved in 4-H, that'll help a lot of kids as well, right?
Yes, 4-H is great. They even have a safety program that they use with the children, and each different type of 4-H program has their own safety embedded into the program.
Now, what about drowning hazards on a farm or acreage or a ranch? Now, what kinds of things do parents and kids really need to be on the lookout for?
Well, again, like we mentioned before, the ponds that are frozen over, dugouts or manure pits even, those could be signed. It's a good idea to sign them. There's go and no-go areas in the farm. I think for children, it's really good idea to say here's a play area, here's an area where you should not go, and around dugouts and water bodies, I think that's really important. Fencing them off if you can, and putting signs up to mark the areas, because manure lagoons would not necessarily freeze over, but they might look like they're frozen over, and somebody might go on those. So marking them and just having supervision. If the children are going to be around water bodies, they should have supervision.
Donna, let's talk a bit about overhead power lines. How much of an issue are they?
That's an issue largely because the equipment is getting so big these days. So the augers that we used on our farm when I was young are way smaller than the augers of today, and so they're more likely to strike a power line. So I think the first control measure that we can do is move the bins away from the power lines or get rid of the overhead power lines if you can. That isn't always possible. So I think working as a team and having a spotter if you're moving the auger around, know your equipment, know how high it is, how close it is to the power line, and have somebody watching when you're moving the equipment around. That will help.
Donna Trottier, the Program Director for Ag Safe Alberta, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.